This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, there we go. And welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We are so excited because this is the first time we have a sex therapist to come and talk to you guys, and she is amazing. Dr. Carolyn Klein is not only has her own practice, but she is on our medical advisory board. So she is so passionate about the community, and we just had to say, hey, can you come join us, talk to us today about sex, intimacy, communication, all of the things. Yesterday was Valentine's Day, and we know that there's some feelings with having a chronic illness that can definitely impact our relationship. So we're so excited to have her to come and impart her words of wisdom to us. I'm going to get my pen and paper. Hope you have your pen and paper, and take it away, Dr. Klein.
Carolyn is perfect. I'm just going to go back to share screen here. All right, hopefully everyone can see that. It means that I don't see all of you, but Kathy will let me know if there are questions or comments coming in. I'm always happy to have them even in the middle of the talk, so please do not hesitate, or you can unmute yourself. But yeah, thrilled to be here and thrilled to be sort of straddling Valentine's Day yesterday and then Vulva Appreciation Day tomorrow. And I do think that for so many people with chronic conditions, particularly things like lichen sclerosis, that do in so many cases impact sexual intimacy, those can be tough days because we maybe are not appreciating our genitals on that day. And with Valentine's Day, we really think of that as being associated with romance and intimacy and sexuality. And when that gets disrupted with a chronic condition, it is really tough. And especially when it disrupts sexuality, something we just do not talk about very openly. So my goal, I've got 1 hour, and we do want to leave about 10-15 minutes for questions because that's often where people get the most useful piece. So I'm going to try not to talk too fast. I do talk fast naturally, and I'll try and slow it down. I do recommend you have pen and paper there because I'm going to hopefully try and achieve a couple of things today. The first one is one of my big goals as a sex therapist and in my sort of public education hat is trying to challenge people's ideas about sex, because I think the way that we often treat sex gets in the way of having really good sexuality. So my slogan on my Instagram and stuff is I want to challenge ideas about sex to make sex less challenging. And so hopefully I'll do a little bit of challenging of some myths that I regularly see in all people, but that become particularly pertinent for my clients with lichen sclerosis or with other chronic conditions that affect the genitals and sexuality. And then the second thing I'm going to do is I always think it's helpful if people are going to attend a talk that they can walk away hopefully with something useful for them. So I am going to, as I challenge different ideas, I'm going to try and give concrete recommendations that I give my clients as well. Because it's a 1 hour talk, I am having to pull from the shortest exercises and recommendations I give. I don't want to misportray sex therapy. Some of the exercises and techniques take a long time to explain, and there's a lot we talk through. And today I'm just cherry picking some really short ones so that you have something to walk away with. And I hope that's really useful. So that's where I hope you'll have your pen and paper handy. Quick thing about me, yes, I'm a registered psychologist and sex therapist here in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. I co-own and co-direct what's called the West Coast Center for Sex Therapy. We are a team of 20 registered psychologists, registered clinical counselors, and PhD level practicum students that we train in evidence-based sex therapy. So we work with individuals, couples, and other partnership configurations, helping them with any kind of sexual concerns, be that dealing with chronic pain conditions, vulvodynia, lichen sclerosis, etc., be that desire discrepancies in couples, problematic sexual behaviors, sexual difficulties. So I'm truly happy to talk about anything to do with sexuality. Turning to lichen sclerosis, one assumption I'm going to make today is that all of you know the condition, either because you are dealing with it yourself or you are the partner or loved one or a healthcare provider working with people with lichen sclerosis. So I am not going to cover lichen sclerosis itself. but rather I'm going to talk about the effect on sexuality and intimacy. And then even more importantly, and the bulk of it, how do we spark the flame? How do we try to get back to the kind of sexuality that brings a lot of connection and pleasure? So let me just hang on here. My slides are not responding. Now they will. Here we go. So we'll just start with saying that for many with lichen sclerosis, sex really is the wrong kind of fire if we're talking about sparking the flame. You know, their genitals are feeling a burning sensation, tearing sensation, itching, etc. And again, I won't belabor this because you probably already know it. But the impact of that for so many people on their sexuality is a whole host of things. For example, even though it originally starts with their genitals or any contact to their genitals hurting them, often this starts to snowball to the person feeling like they don't want to be sexual at all because they foresee that it may lead to genital contact, which then leads to genital pain. And then this can snowball further to avoiding even affection, because that might then lead to sexual arousal in themselves or their partners and desire to be sexual, which then might lead to genital pain. So I see a lot of my clients who, by the time they come into my office, are saying, yeah, even if my partner is just coming up to me to kiss my neck, to just cuddle up, I wonder, does my partner want to be sexual? And if so, I don't want to disappoint them. I don't want to feel pain. And so I'm just shutting even down the affection part of our relationship. And then this can snowball further to some of my clients saying, I feel like I can't even have a normal relationship. We've lost now not only the sexual intimacy, but also the physical and affectionate part of our relationship. Are we now more like just roommates, really missing that, grieving that, and feeling like they are abnormal? And then for some of my clients, that even translates into thoughts of, I'm unlovable. You know, do I even go out there and date? Is this fair to my partner? My partner should be able to have a sex life. And I always think, well, so should you. So I always want to say how lovely to think of your partners, but also to think of what you lose in that whole snowball. And you know, it's more than even just, again, the sexuality and the relationship to your partner. It's often the relationship to yourself and feeling betrayed by your own body, feeling like you no longer love your own body if at one point you did. And sadly, so many people don't even love their body in the first place. And then this throws another wrench into it. I also just want to comment for partners. And again, any partners here, they can also speak for themselves. And if people want to put things in the chat, I again won't right now look at the chat just so I'm not distracted. Kathy will let me know if there's anything urgent, but for all of you to feel the sense of community, please feel free to put it, whether some of this snowball resonates for you. And for partners, how tricky it can be, because so often I'm meeting with partners and they're saying, I don't want to cause my partner pain. And I don't know how to navigate that. I want them to feel that I still desire them and love them, but I also don't want to put pressure on them. And then sometimes partners are feeling very rejected, even though they know cognitively that it's due to the lichen sclerosis. But because of this snowball and feeling like now there isn't even affection, it can feel like they don't feel lovable anymore. They can feel like guilty that they still have that sexual desire and are still really mourning that. So the impact on relationships can be really huge and can start to lead to people to question, should we be in this relationship, even though the relationship itself might be such a beautiful one. I'll just pause here. Does anyone want to say anything coming up in the chat before we move into what do we do about this? If there is anything, I'll just hold for a moment.
Yeah, someone says the snowball is exactly right. So you're definitely resonating and hitting a chord. Someone else said all of this, yes.
Yeah. Which is horrible, right? Horrible that already we're dealing with lichen sclerosis. That already sucks. And then we're dealing with layer after layer after layer. And so again, I don't want to belabor that because I'd rather move to the hopeful side of what do we do to get out of it. But again, please feel free to put it in the chat. I don't want to minimize that. In fact, I hope with what I'm about to say that it really validates that and we move through it within what's reasonable in a 1 hour time span. So let me keep going, but keep putting things in the chat if you like. Now, what I really hope to now switch it to is that when it comes to sex, what is going on in our body is nowhere near as important as what's going on in our brain. And I want to be very clear here, that is not to invalidate how much is going on in the body. That is not to invalidate the pain, the discomfort, the anxiety, the sadness, all of these different things that accompany what's going on in the body. But when I, as a sex therapist and a psychologist, think about sexuality, I do work with people with spinal cord injuries where they might be quadriplegic, where they do not have sensation or mobility in their body. I work with people with all types of chronic pain conditions that affect sexuality. I work with people who've undergone cancer treatments that affect their ability to have sexual function. And the reason I feel like I can help them as a psychologist is because we psychologists are focused on the brain more than the body. And you may have heard this before, but it is the brain that is our biggest sex organ. And the great news, if there's going to be any good news about lichen sclerosus, is it is not affecting your brain in terms of what it can do sexually. So even though I want to really validate what's happening in the body, when it comes to sex, that is not going to be as important as what's going on in the brain. And that's where I want to now put the emphasis of what do we do with our wonderful brains that are still working beautifully so that we can have the kind of sex life we really can enjoy. And so here what I say is just like we shouldn't need a turkey to have a good Thanksgiving, we don't need our genitals to have good sex. And again, let me explain this. And I could replace, you know, if you don't live in the States or Canada where we celebrate Thanksgiving, I could say, you know, we shouldn't need a Christmas tree to have a great Christmas, or we shouldn't need a birthday cake to have a great birthday. That doesn't mean that we don't love to have that there. And same thing with sex. It does not mean that we might not really enjoy being able to have pain-free sexual activities, including with our genitals. But if I had someone where turkeys were just completely sold out and they were going to be sold out for the next 3 years, and they're used to having it for Thanksgiving, and they said, well, I'm just not going to celebrate Thanksgiving anymore. What's the point? We don't have a turkey. Probably your gut instinct would say to the person, hang on here. It's not about the turkey itself. It is about connection. It is about socializing. It's about coming together. It's about so many other things that can bring joy and pleasure. And so we'd move away from the focus on the turkey and we'd get a ham or we'd, you know, make a casserole or whatever it is. And we'd hopefully have a wonderful time. And I want to say the same thing is if I can help my clients to let go of the idea that their genitals are necessary for good sex, they actually can go on to have fantastic sexual experiences while still missing and mourning the fact that they don't get to include their genitals as well. So again, I don't want to invalidate it, but I want to challenge it for sure. And one of my big things that I say all the time is great sex does not come from opening our legs. And it doesn't come from what's between our legs. Great sex comes from opening our minds. And that's, again, what we're going to do now. So we're going to open our minds to other ways of being sexual that don't depend on our genitals, that may be experiencing a lot of discomfort right now. So I'm going to talk about 3 critical skills that I think everyone needs for great lifelong sex. Maybe not for a one-off, maybe not for the first few months of dating, but if we're going to have fantastic sex lives throughout our lifespan, and we've doubled our lifespan in the last 100 years. You know, the average life expectancy 100 years ago was 45. We've almost doubled that. So if we're going to have great lifelong sex, I don't think we can get into our older years, go through health issues, all these things, if we don't have these 3 great skills. And here's what they are, and then I'm going to talk about strategies for that. We need to be able to use our words, some kind of language. We need to be able to use our imagination, and we need to be able to use our whole body. And by whole body, let me make sure that doesn't come out wrong. You know, again, we may not be using our genitals in this moment if there's pain in them, but then we need to be able to move out from the H-O-L-E in the word whole. So not just focusing on where, you know, the vaginal, where the vagina is and the hole. We need to go to our whole selves, and that we still have so many other parts of our body that can experience pleasure and joy. And that's even again true in my clients who are quadriplegic. It's like what parts of the body do still have sensation and mobility. So if we can focus on these 3 things, we've got great skills. So let's go into that in more detail. Using your words. When I think about using your words, you know, I think about the power of language, and I am, if anyone's familiar with cognitive behavioral therapy, I am trained in cognitive behavioral therapy, and we always say the way we think really impacts the way we feel. And the way we think is dependent on our wording in our mind. And so for many people, if I tell them about my famous lava cake recipe and I describe just how amazing it is, and they haven't eaten the last couple hours, maybe just those words are going to lead them to salivate. If I tell you about the biggest loss I've ever had in my life, maybe me just using those words will lead you to feel a sense of sadness and maybe even get teary-eyed. In the same way, if I used words that describe hot, amazing sexuality, just maybe it's going to lead your heart to race a little bit and you to feel a little tingling in your body. Our words have way more impact on the way we feel sexually than the use of our genitals. And I can't tell you how many times I have couples and clients come in and they talk about trying to, spark the flame and trigger desire. And they do it by rubbing genitals if they don't have lycanthrosis. If they go straight for rubbing genitals, if they're trying to rub the magic genie out of the lamp, and they're saying, Carolyn, why isn't this working? And it's because our genitals are not actually that great of a route to actually really get us excited and anticipating things. Our words are way more powerful. Now, whenever I say that, a lot of my clients will initially have some resistance. For example, they might say, but sex is something you do. You shouldn't have to talk about it. I hear that actually a lot. People sort of feel like having to talk about sex is something for people who have problems with sex. And the thing is that I always say is, if we take sex out of the special little box that our society has put it in, and if we were to actually treat it like everything else, we would have a lot less sexual concerns. Because there is nothing else I can think of in life where we think that we should just do it and not talk about it. We would never say, you know what, you should just get married, don't talk about it. You know what, you should just buy that house, don't talk about it. You know what, go ahead and have kids, don't talk about it. Everything else, we say, let's talk through it. Let's actually communicate because it is something that is relational. And so I would argue, yes, great sex really depends on being able to have great communication about it. It's the only way you're going to know what each person wants and likes. But then we come across the next one. And my screen blocks it just because of the way the screen share works, but I think the words under my bubble is, but I'm not comfortable talking about sex. What would I say? And that's the next thing I come up against. And it is so true that the vast majority of us grew up not having any role modeling about how to talk about sexuality. Most people did not go to university for 12 years like I did, having lots of supervision and practice and talking about sex, and now spending every day, all day talking about sex. So I'm aware that this is a big thing. And particularly for people who are women or raised as women, there is an even bigger barrier where as women, we have often been socialized to be demure, to not own our sexuality, to not speak up, to sort of be at risk of being labeled as inappropriate, unprofessional, slutty, dirty if we express things. And so, for me professionally, I'm constantly trying to fight against that, saying this doesn't make sense if my goal is to help partnerships to have better intimacy. We have to talk about it. But what do you say? And, it's going to start small, and I'm going to give some specific exercises in a moment. But when we think about what to say, we're thinking about sometimes that we're going to share our fantasies and desires. And right away, I often again get a lot of like, oh, that is really scary. What if my partner judges me for what I am turned on by? What does it mean that I am turned on by these things? Am I normal? Because nobody's talking about it. So nobody knows whether their fantasies and desires are normal. And I have many, many couples who come to me and they're saying, no, we don't talk about that. Do we have to? And my answer to them is, no, you don't have to. But on the other hand, again, do we treat anything else sexually like that? Do you ever say, you know what? Do I really need to know about my partner's dreams for retirement? Do I really need to know about my partner's upbringing in childhood? Yeah, we would say that that's part of intimacy. And I always think intimacy is that we know our partners better than anyone else does. We know each other and we know that we are accepted as is. And when we don't share our fantasies and our desires, it's like we have something that we are ashamed of. But I also want to quickly give a tiny bit of education about fantasies, which relates to these three buckets that you're seeing in the screen in front of you, to try and also reassure you about the benefits of talking about it and give you a way to talk about it with your partner. And that is that really we can, if we oversimplify, we can categorize desires and fantasies into these three buckets. One bucket is the things we would love to try out, and maybe we've already tried them. We know that those things are hot for us and we like it. Then we have another bucket. It might not be the same size as the first bucket, but we have another bucket, which is, I don't know if I want to try that. Maybe the idea kind of like, titillates me a little bit, but I don't know, maybe it would not be as good in real life. Maybe it would complicate things. I'm not sure, but I kind of like the idea and I'm at least open to it a little bit. And the third bucket is, it turns me on. I would never do it in real life. It is just in my fantasy or imagination. And we do the exact same thing with all forms of entertainment. And sex is entertainment. So probably you can take your television shows or your movies and you can categorize them. So I can watch a movie and I can be like, oh my God, I want to go to that place in the movie. I want to go to Tahiti. I want to go there. And then I've got the maybes. I've got the, oh, you know what? I don't do well with crowded places. Maybe I love documentaries on India, but I don't know if I really would do so well with the crowds there, but maybe I'm kind of intrigued. There might be some places in India. And then there's some stuff where you're going to be like, look, I love to watch this documentary, but for me, I'm never going to outer space. I love it, but there's no way I'm getting on a rocket ship, not in real life. And if you think of your entertainment, if you think of your shows, you have got a lot of television shows that show some really crazy stuff. You might be watching CSI Special Victims Unit that has, talk of assaults and horrible things. You might be watching, Tom Cruise and Mission Impossible and things are blowing up everywhere. And it doesn't mean you want it in real life. And the problem with people, us not talking openly about sexuality, is that so many people are afraid that if they share their fantasies, their partner will right away assume, oh, does that mean you actually want that in real life? And does that mean you've not been happy with the sex that we've been having? And that's because we haven't differentiated between these three buckets. And so I'd love to encourage, and I'll go into this a bit more in a moment, that you can actually say, like, what's in your non-real life bucket? What's in your thing that just gets your heart racing? Because when we get sexually turned on, we get sympathetic nervous system activation. We get blood flowing to our genitals and to all parts of our body. And so in order to have our blood flowing, we can't be just thinking about mopping the floor. And we can't be thinking about just the missionary position all day for the rest of our, whatever number of years of our life. We have to make it exciting, just like the television shows we watch. And so you are going to have fantasies of things that turn you on because they get your heart racing, but you don't want them in real life. And I would love for you to invite your partner to share one of those, to say what's something that you've gotten turned on by, you would never want it, it doesn't mean anything about your values, I don't have to worry about it, but I want to get to know you better because we're intimate partners. And what's something that's maybe a maybe? And what's something that you really love? We've either done it or you haven't. And that to me is real intimacy. It's ironic to me that I often have better intimacy with my clients than they have with their partner, in the sense that I know them better sexually than even their partners do. Let me just pause out here because for some people this is really helpful. For some people they have a lot of questions or concerns. Kathy, I don't know if you're still there or if you've had to rush off for your kids, but if anyone wants to chime in or if there's anything in the chat in reaction to that, any questions or comments?
Not saying anything yet, but if you have the time after, or if you want to use incorporate it, or maybe you're going to talk about it later, is for people who are dating or who are trying to date. Like, when do they talk to their partners about this? When do they even bring it up?
Great question. Let me take it on briefly now, and then I'll keep going, and then I can always expand if there's more questions about it. The question around dating, these are, again, things that are personal, kind of like how much money is in our bank account and how much debt we have and what medications are in our medicine cabinet. So I definitely don't think that people need to say it right away unless it is something that is critical for them, unless it's like a non-negotiable of like, I only want to be with a partner if they have this same sexual interest, or I only want a partner who for sure has no debt and this much money in their account. If it's a non-negotiable, you may as well say it early on, because then otherwise you're wasting your time dating. But otherwise, I really do think that we all have things that we go in order of. When do we feel comfortable sharing something that is very personal and that we don't tell everyone, whether that's finances, our health, or our sexual interests? So to me, it's always a question of how important is it that your partner have the same interests, or again, the same financial goals, etc. And as it's more and more important, we should be bringing it up earlier and earlier and screening out those that aren't going to be a good fit. And as it's not necessarily critical, we can now focus instead in the early dating on the other stuff that's really important. Do we both want to have kids? Do we both want to, one day retire to Florida? And so I would say always it's in the order of importance and allowing yourself to get more comfortable. But what I wouldn't want, that I see way too often, and again, that's just because of the way we treat sex in our culture, is that people don't talk about it at all. And then they are in their retirement years and they are missing sexuality and they don't feel like they have true sexual intimacy, even if they still are engaging in sexual activity. It feels somewhat lonely. It feels somewhat disconnected. That means we've left it way too long before talking about it. Ideally, it's kind of this interesting thing that we talk about, that most people have sex before they ever talk about it. And there's nothing else. Kids talk about driving a car for years and years and years before they ever get to drive one. Before we put a kid on a horse, we talk about the horse. And yet with sexuality, we are engaging in sex with people before we've ever spoken about it. And that's a bit messed up. Like, that sets us up for problems with sexuality. So ideally, before you start having sex, you're having this conversation. But I know that's pie in the sky for me. I know that is not the way most of us were raised. That, though, is my goal, to start to challenge
that. Yeah. Specifically to fantasies, there are a couple of questions. What's a good way to start the conversation around these things? And then the other question is, can you again explain, like, how does talking about these fantasies help the relationship?
Yeah, great questions. Okay, so I'm going to take them in that order because I'll move to the next slide to answer that. So where do we start, or how do we restart if lichen sclerosis has interrupted what before was a great sex life? And so here are my tips and exercises for this piece of, like, using your words. I'll go through these and then I'm going to come back to Kathy's questions there. So this first tip, that again, I'm using very simple strategies today just from a time perspective. If you were my client, we might be talking about things that are much more elaborate and going into it. In case any of you came late today, I'm using some of the nice short strategies. But you might consider a sexclusive email address or jar. And this comes from Dr. Esther Perel, who many of you might know of. She has two really famous TED Talks based on her two books, one of them being Mating in Captivity. And in Mating in Captivity, she talks a little bit about this. She doesn't use the word sexclusive, I'm using that word. But she sort of says, can we help couples to get back to, or to create a space for sexual communication by, for example, setting up, each one sets up an email account, a Hotmail account or whatever, that is only to be used for flirtatious or sexual communication. So it's not to be talking about when the kid's basketball game is. It's not to be sending emails about, did you see this thing in the news? And what that allows for is it allows that people get excited to check their email, and that they're checking it when they're ready in an open place for that, and that they're sending something and they don't have to right away confront that. How do I say it right? What if my partner's not in the right place for it? Because they know their partner is only going to check that email address when their partner is in the right place to say, hey, I'm going to check this email. Has my partner sent something? We're building some anticipation, we're approaching it with openness, and we're creating a safe place to write it, because the other person can also take time to process whatever has been written in that email. If you're not comfortable using email, I've had some of my clients use a jar, and they just put something in the jar that's hidden in some cupboard somewhere, and they check if the jar has a little note in it. So we do not have to use technology if we don't want to, but it is a beautiful way to create that anticipation and open up communication. Secondly, and this goes to Kathy's question or someone else's question of sharing desires and fantasies, ideally people talk about sex the same way they talk about everything else. Ideally, they could say, you know what, I've never tried this topping on pizza before. Have you ever tried it? Do you like it? Do you think I should try it? And ideally, they could just say the same thing. But again, I know that's a little bit optimistic of me. So if that feels challenging, I want to give some other options here. One is that I will often have clients who struggle to talk openly about sexuality because that's not how they were raised. I get them to start by crawling into bed or on the couch in front of the fire or whatever feels romantic, and they have an agreement they're not going to do anything sexual, so that there's no pressure that they should get turned on. It's just about seeing what happens when they start communicating about sex, and they're just going to pull off a fantasy off the internet. If it starts to disgust them, because there's plenty of stuff that's not going to turn you on, just stop it and go to a different one. But just starting to use the language and read a fantasy out loud, and to notice, does it get people's heart racing a little bit? Does it feel like, wow, this is really intimate that we're sitting here talking about this kind of stuff. Because for many people, that is such a different feeling than just lying in bed and each person is scrolling on their phone. Or I have another one. And at the end of my talk, you'll see my email address and my Instagram account. So you can either direct message me on Instagram or you can email me if you would like me to email this to you. I'm more than happy to. I made something a long time ago for my clients. It is several pages worth of strips of paper where it describes various different sexual activities. So for example, it might be watching an erotic video with my partner before or during sexual intimacy. And then what my clients do is they cut out the little strips and they sit there and they categorize their buckets with their partner. So they don't have to come up with the words because they're like, I don't even know what to say. But they just get to be like, nope. And by the way, there's a fourth bucket that I didn't put on here, which is the fourth bucket is that does not turn me on. That's a turn off. And so clients get to sit there and move their piece of paper around, and they know that just like food or places that they want to travel, they're not going to be perfectly aligned. One person is always going to have something in this bucket that the other person does not have in that bucket. But it's the idea of like, let's start to have a way of communicating about this. And we don't have to come up with the words at first because we're not good at it. My list is not all inclusive. You can make your own list. You don't have to use mine. I'm sure there's plenty you could add to it. And if you want to, send me the things and I'll add them in for my clients to benefit from. But it again was something because I noticed so many of my clients did struggle with, I don't even know how to say it. I don't even know what to do. So it's easier if I just read this strip of paper and move it. And then we start to get comfortable talking about it. So I hope that answers that first question of how can we get a bit more comfortable with it? And we might start with reading something someone else wrote or doing this categorizing likes and dislikes kind of an exercise. The second question is, how does communication again help with sexual intimacy? Great question. The answer is because two things that are interconnected. The first one is because it increases intimacy. As we know our partners better, we will feel more connected to them. And we will feel more loved, that we can share anything, including sexuality, and know that this is the one person, or if you have multiple partnerships, you might be poly, that these are the people that know everything about you and still love you. That is so connecting if we're talking about intimacy. Whereas when we have to hide something, when we feel like we don't talk about that, that's an area where there is no intimacy, where there is no connection. And so it's ironic that we talk about sexual intimacy, and yet I would say that many people have very poor sexual intimacy. They don't know each other sexually at all, and they don't have perfect comfort with one another sexually. So that's my number one reason, is it improves intimacy. And the second one is, many times, it is going to lead to sexual desire and arousal. It is going to be hot. And you will see that in people who sext. You will see that in people who are not actually physically in the same space, that to communicate sexually can be incredibly sexual and erotic. We do not, again, need to have genitals to have a sexual experience with another human being. And when we, again, have something like lichen sclerosis that maybe is impacting the ability to use our genitals, we've got to be able to pull from eggs in lots of other baskets. And one of those is, again, sexuality and sexual desire and arousal. They live in the brain. They might impact our genitals, but it lives in the brain. So we want to trigger that. And communication is one of the best ways to do that. I hope that answers the question. Okay, so let's then go to the next one. The next one I said, top skill, is using your imagination. I think it's really interesting how many people are not okay with the use of imagination during sexual intimacy because of the messages they've been given about sex. And the way this shows up is people will say, shouldn't we be enough? We don't need to use toys. We don't need to use lingerie. We don't need to use erotica. And any one of those, no problem at all. But when people say we should just be enough, I always say, and is that what you do on date night as well? You don't watch any movies. You don't put on any candles. You don't set the table night. You just stare at each other, and that's your hottest date night. And people then are like, no, of course not. We do lots of fun things. We sometimes go for a walk, and sometimes we go to a wine tasting, and they're bringing in all this creativity of let's bring in some newness. Let's use our imagination of what would be fun. And yet with sexuality, so many couples over the span of their relationship get into what we as sex therapists call scripted sex. They do the same thing in the same order, in the same way. And it isn't very intimate. It often, again, leaves people feeling a little bit hollow. And when we, again, have a chronic pain condition like lichen sclerosis, again, the use of our imagination becomes really important as another source of sparking that flame, of getting excited and building anticipation. Because if it's I'll give you an example. If it's the end of my workday like today, I'm going to probably get home and my lovely husband is probably going to, well, he's probably not, but if he did say, Carolyn, do you want to go out tonight for a dinner after your long work day? I might be like, you know what, I'm not really interested. But if he says, Carolyn, I've got a surprise for you. You want to go out for dinner after your work day? Guess what? I'm going to be like, yes, I do. And so we want to make sure we're using our imagination and getting out of scripted sex. Sex is how adults play. We also play in other ways. We can go play hockey, we can go play Scrabble, but sexuality serves a very important function, and you'll see that in all species, which is that it is also, all mammalian species, that it's also a form of play. And in order for it to be play, we have to step out of our day-to-day. So I'm going to talk about my daughter for a moment, and this is not about sex, but I'm going to again show how our brain treats sex like everything else, it's just society does. So my daughter, she's now 9, but when she was a little bit younger, she would do a ton of pretend play. She still does it now, but not as much. And do you think that she ever played that she was the 6-year-old daughter of a psychologist? Absolutely not. She never played that. She always played that she was the mom of 20 children and 50 dogs. She played that she was a warrior princess, a kung fu master. She played all these things that she is not in her day, because when we play, we actually want to get out of our day-to-day. I do not play by mopping my floor. I do that anyway. So when we think about sexuality, we want to actually use our imagination and get creative and be comfortable saying, you know what, I want to play in this way because that's not my day-to-day life. And I won't belabor this because of time, and it's not necessarily what each person here is interested in, but it's sort of like, yes, we do see that sometimes when people say they've had the best sexual experiences, it's when they got to get out of the role that they are in all day long, whether that's the role of the giver or the role of always, having to make all the decisions and being in control. Sometimes during sexuality, people want to let go of all of that. So what are you suggesting, Carolyn? What are you saying? Do we have to swing from the chandelier? Of course not, unless that's what you're interested in. Here's what I'm suggesting. First of all, you might consider, and again, these are just my short little ones. No worries if it's not right for you. Take what's good, leave the rest behind. But you might consider going on a different persona date. Again, this does not require your genitals, but it sure is intimate and connecting because you're doing an experience together. And this is what some people will call the role play thing, where you guys go out to some pub or coffee bar or whatever, and you pretend to be 2 different people, and you meet some people, and you get to just play, just like my daughter does in make-believe. And some people will say, well, Carolyn, that is so silly. And I'll say, well, have you ever gone to a costume party? Did you ever dress up for Halloween? And did you ever find how fun that was to step out of your normal role? Did you ever end up at a party and you danced all night, even though normally you're someone who's more quiet? We actually love to sometimes get out of ourselves. And so to have a way to connect that doesn't depend on genitals, for many people is incredibly intimate and can spark that flame again. Or another option might be to do something that we call guess the object game. And here's what it would be. And this one here is more physically intimate, whereas the different persona game isn't necessarily about physicality. And this is where each of you are going to take on the task of picking 5 objects from around your home or your office. Any object you like. You could do more than 5, you could do less. And then what's going to happen is partner, if it's a 2-person partnership, partner A is going to blindfold partner B. Partner B is going to lie down either naked or with their bra and underwear on, depending on their comfort level. If they don't want any genital contact because of lichen sclerosis or other reasons, just leave your underwear on and show that as the no-go zone. And then what you're going to do is you're going to help your partner to feel a whole bunch of beautiful sensations in their body using objects from your home that they need to guess. So I this morning quickly grabbed 3 objects just to make my point. I have these napkin rings that have an interesting texture, and it could be that if I was doing this game with my partner, that I would be helping them to guess, but I don't want them to get it right away. So I'm going to, decide where on their body I'm going to move this napkin ring, and I'm going to kind of stroke their face or their arm, and then I'm going to kind of put the 2 rings together and do it together and see if they can ultimately guess this object. And for many people, that again is so intimate to lie there with their eyes closed and have someone touching them in intentional, slow, sensual, beautiful ways as they just get present in their body and have this playfulness Like, what is this object? What did you pick from our home? Or another object I picked is this, panhandle, this rubbery panhandle that's got all these little nubs on it. Or it could be this decorative pineapple that I don't know why I have in my home that's got all these different things on it. And the amount of playfulness, so many times I, as a sex therapist, hear again the grief in people where sex has become heavy. It's not playful, it's not light. It is that it always feels pressured, the pressure of do I have to say yes, the dread of will I get rejected, etc. So I guess the object game is a wonderful way to get playful, use our imagination, get into our bodies. Or you could incorporate 5 senses. If you just, for example, love to give massages, again, maybe not using the genitals if that's where it's painful, maybe now you're going to try giving a massage where you're going to play around with the 5 senses. So I always say to people that a sexual experience or a sensual experience, if I'm talking about massage, is going to be very different if I am listening to Enya, like in a spa, versus Nine Inch Nails, versus Britney Spears, versus an African drum beat, versus dirty talk, versus dead silence because you don't want to be heard, versus loving talk. And so we need to think about what are the 5 senses. Can we actually play around with sound? Can we play around with sight? How does it change if we give that massage with candles laid out all around the room? How does it change if we actually put different scents on, like diffusers or whatever it might be? And it's interesting because early on in dating, couples do that naturally. Early on in dating, the room is spotless, they've got the candles on, they've got the music. And by the time couples show up in my office talking about sexuality, it's usually the end of the day, last thing they do, they brush their teeth, they wash their face, they put their pajamas on, they lie in bed. There's nothing romantic. The laundry is at the foot of the bed, the dog is also at the foot of the bed. And they're not recognizing that context really matters. And that sort of that environment and the changing of the senses really can change the experience. And then finally, the third one I said is use your whole body. And again, I don't mean by that you should use your genitals if they're in pain or your neck that's in pain. I'm just saying we need to get away from the HOLE in whole, that too many people are so focused on intercourse or on penetrative sexual activities or on genital activities. And we have all this other skin surface to play with. So many other parts where we can receive pleasure. I want to quickly talk about the power of passionate kissing. I regularly say to my clients that kissing is one of the most intimate things we can do. If I can just be crass for a moment, as a woman myself, I've had plenty of things inside my vagina. I've had speculums, I've had tampons, I've had vaginal ultrasounds when I was pregnant with my daughter, and just because something was in my vagina did not make it sexual and it did not make it intimate. And people can even lie there and have someone inside of them during intercourse while they're pissed off at them. They can lie there like a dead fish. But it is next to impossible to passionately kiss someone that you do not have an intimate connection with. Our mouths are actually a huge source of pleasure and intimacy. So I really encourage my couples to get back to daily passionate kissing, not as foreplay into other sexual activities, but as a way to continue to have the intimate bond. Because early on in dating, that's what people did. They kissed at, before dinner, they kissed after dinner as they're driving home and got to the house and they're fumbling to put their keys in the lock. They were making out. When they were leaving to say goodbye to each other at the end of the night, they passionately kissed. And then so many couples, by the time I see them, they're giving each other the peck on the lips or the peck on the cheek, kind of like what they give grandma or auntie. And it's not passionate at all. And so they're losing that connection. And it gets really difficult to go from 0 to 180 of we've got really no passionate connection, but now we're supposed to be sexually intimate. So get into passionate kissing again. And I don't mean a full makeout session. You may not have time for that. Passionate kissing can take 3 seconds. That's great. And also just explore the whole rest of the body. So I'm just about done here. I know I want to get to questions here in a moment. But when we think of tips for this and exercises, I'm going to quickly give you my kissing game that I give to couples where they say, oh, it's kind of awkward to get past to passionate kissing. We did that early on, but it's been so long. Or for couples where one of them discloses to me, I don't actually love the way we kiss, but I don't know how to help my partner know the way I love to kiss. So if you've got your pen and paper handy, here's what you would do if you want to try the kissing game. You're going to be writing down 5 kisses on pieces of paper, and you're going to randomly throw them in a jar. Here are the 5 kisses, again, not in the order you're necessarily going to do them. 1 is your romantic movie kiss. The romantic movie kiss, if you ever watch a romantic movie, not pornography, you're not going to see a lot of tongue, because watching tongue is actually a little bit gross for viewers. what you're going to see is you're going to see a lot of hands, cupping faces, holding necks. You're not going to see an air gap between bodies. Bodies are going to be pushed together. You're going to see open mouth, but no tongue. You're going to see pulling away and looking in each other's eyes. So one is your romantic movie kiss. The second one, again, not necessarily in this order, might be your full-on pornographic kiss. This is shove your tongue down your partner's throat. This is grab their private parts if they don't have pain, or their breasts or whatever parts of their body. This is the sort of grinding. This is the no holds barred, just go for it kiss. Your third kiss is, if this is a partnership of two people, is your partner A kiss. And so partner A is going to coach partner B in what feels like an amazing kiss on that day and that moment that you are doing. So partner A is going to say to partner B, can you kiss me and wrap your arms around me here and kiss me pretty firmly? And then partner B is going to do that. And then partner A is going to be like, that was nice, but can't you do that? Can you make a little sound? And then you're going to try that. Oh yeah, that's great. And then as you're doing that, can you also just move your hand up my back a little bit? And you're going to coach your partner until you say, that was an amazing kiss. Your fourth kiss is partner B's kiss, so same thing. And your fifth kiss is your something new kiss. If you're not used to kissing each other on the neck, you might do that. If you've never given each other I don't like the word because it's got a different connotation, but growing up, so just, what I mean, people used to call it an Eskimo kiss, with your noses. What have you not done before? And this is again about bringing playfulness in and our imagination and getting back into kissing that is such an intimate act. So you're going to put those on pieces of paper, you're going to throw them in a jar, and you're going to have fun, and you can have your tea or your glass of wine or whatever, and you're going to pull these kisses out in random order, and you're going to laugh, and you're going to learn, and you're going to reconnect. And then the other one is you could also do what's called the chocolate game for exploring the whole body. This is where I get clients to take a little piece of chocolate, nothing that has a really strong smell, or a little jelly bean, and partner A is going to lay down and be blindfolded. Sorry, not be blindfolded. They're going to blindfold partner B. They're going to lie down and they're going to place the little piece of chocolate or jelly bean somewhere on their body as they lie there unclothed, or again, if there's a part that you don't want touched, then you just leave clothes on that part of the body. And partner B is blindfolded and all with their mouth, no sniffing it out, no with hands, needs to find that piece of chocolate or that jelly bean. And that again has people laughing. It's a little bit ticklish. It's super intimate and sensual. It's not something that you do with everyone. And so I just really recommend these as a way to bring fun back in, bring that spark back in, and see where that leads. The third one I put an asterisk because of time. I don't have time to go through it. But when we think of sex therapy, I, again, am giving such simple, fast little exercises here, and it doesn't do sex therapy justice. We do have a beautiful technique called sensate focus that moves in stages. It requires quite a bit of instruction. If you Google it, you can find different versions, some which I really support, some a little bit less so, because people have sort of tweaked things, and some I don't find so helpful. But it's a beautiful way if you want to, again, explore the whole body that walks you through a sex therapy technique that has a lot of support behind it. Just that, again, I'm not only talking about quick techniques. Now, very quickly here as I wrap up, if you are going to include genital touch, I just want to say the following with lichen sclerosis. First one is when you have lichen sclerosis, genital means gentle. That really becomes very, very key in talking to your partner. I've got my vulva model here. It's a little bit hard for me to know because I can't have the feedback, so hopefully you guys can see this well. Many women are not socialized to look at their own genitals. They don't know them well. Many partners don't get a chance to properly look at their genitals. But again, when we're thinking about lichen sclerosis, everyone's going to be different. But some women are going to really have, some issues here at their clitoris at the top where the hood is kind of fusing a little bit. It can be incredibly painful to have stimulation right there at the clitoris. Many women are going to have this introital stenosis where the entrance to the vagina itself here is starting to close. And so putting something in can be incredibly painful, may not be good for them at all. And of course, you can have these patches where it is irritated, itchy, burning, tearing. These in terms of anatomy, again, here we've got the labia majora or the outer labia. Here we've got the labia minora or inner labia. The clitoris has, again, these big legs actually underneath the tissue that run down called pura. So that's where we can get lots of sensitivity right through the whole vulva. And then, the urethra is here, the entrance here within what we call the vulvar vestibule. Again, clitoris can be incredibly painful if directly stimulated for some women with lichen sclerosis. vaginal opening can be incredibly painful, and then there can be certain areas. So we need to, again, have that communication for that. If you're going to be doing genital touch, good quality, safe lube is a must. I've outlined safe because lubes, at least here in Canada, they are not regulated. Anyone can put anything they want in lube, and a lot of it is not safe to put on genitals. Here in Canada, I don't make any money off of this, but I can highly recommend Okanagan Joy, made by 2 women in the Okanagan, and they do ship to the States and elsewhere as well. And it is a lube that is perfectly safe to put on our bodies. There's many others out there as well. Secondly, oral play can be really great because it is a little bit more gentle than something like penetration with fingers or a penis. Gentler or smaller toys that go on either side of the clitoris rather than directly on it like this one, something that's smaller if you are wanting insertion and there's been any of that that narrowing of the vagina, and ones that don't have like the high vibration. Dental dams, a lot of people don't know about dental dams that you can buy at a sex store, not at a dentistry store, but it's the same thing as when you go to the dentist and they put this in your mouth. This is what ones look like. They can come in different colors. They're not just used for safe sex, they are also used for if you are putting creams because of lichen sclerosis on your genitalia and you'd love to have oral sex, but you're worried about your partner getting it on their mouth. Then you can use this really thin dental dam that doesn't disrupt the feeling of pleasure. And now your partner can perform oral sex on you. Or again, when you're thinking of toys, maybe you don't want a toy vibrating right on your skin, so you could use a dental dam as well, or other barriers to make it more comfortable. And then finally, I just want to mention I've got 2 more, sorry. When I said gentler, smaller toys, also knowing that nowadays there are lots of toys on the market that are more these air pulse vibrators that go over the clitoris, where they're not touching the clitoris. It's air stimulation. And that way, for some people with lichen sclerosis, that's way more comfortable than something that's actually touching their genital area, but they can get almost the same sensation from a vibrator. And then the O-nut, if you don't know this and you do want some penetration, but it is painful if it's going deeper, the O-nut, again, I don't make any money off of this, is a product where you can put these different silicone rings, they're soft and spongy, onto the penis or onto a toy so that it doesn't go in too deep. And so just want to mention that the sex toy industry is working very hard nowadays to come up with more and more products with people with various conditions that affect their ability to have sex the way many people typically think of. All right. So overall, lichen sclerosis sucks, but your sex life doesn't have to. Use your words, use your imagination, use your whole body, and hopefully some of these really simple, easy techniques might be one way to just start sparking the flame. Consider a great sex therapist if you want more in-depth ones that take into account your personal dynamics, your values, etc. And I'm going to skip my last slide here. And I'll just go now to questions. If you want to email me or follow on Instagram and direct message me, my name has a weird spelling, no E on the end of Carolyn, but my email, carolyn@carolinklein.com, and on Instagram at DR for Dr. Carolyn Klein. All right, happy to open it to questions and comments. I'll leave this for one more moment and then I'll stop share screen, just to give everyone enough time to write those down if they want to.
I also put them in the chat for people. Someone did ask if you could tell them, talk about where to get that lube again. What was the lube?
Yeah, Intimate Wellbeing. So I think their website is intimatewellbeing.com or intimatewellbeing.ca. I can't remember, but the store is Intimate Wellbeing and their lube is called Okanagan Joy. And again, I don't make any money off of it, but I know for sure it is a great, safe lube. Perfect. Thanks, Jacqueline, for putting that in. That's great.
Yeah. We've got a few questions, and I know we're a little short on time, and I do have a surprise announcement that I want to make for you guys. So let's try to get through some of these here. So someone said they're dealing with infidelity early in the relationship, and fantasies feel dangerous. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah. You know, without knowing more, here are my initial thoughts. My initial thoughts, first of all, are always, was the repair done when there's been a breach like that, to now create the safety for fantasies? And some people don't know what healthy repair looks like, because again, we don't talk about this very openly. But if it feels like repair wasn't done, that needs to happen first, because again, we are being intimate. We're opening up and being vulnerable, and we need to feel safe doing so. But then I hope it is helpful that afterwards, again, we can differentiate these buckets. And I do work a lot with couples where there's been an infidelity. And oftentimes for the person who has felt betrayed and been betrayed, there was a crossing of the line, they need to know what stuff is a risk factor. Like, this really represents where my partner started to go down the rabbit hole and do something wrong. And what's the stuff that's a red herring? To talk about these fantasies, this actually enhances our intimacy and it's not a risk factor. So I know I'm answering that very briefly, but first of all, we need to make sure proper repair. And then we need to know what truly is just going to help this couple to have intimacy and is at no risk of leading to another betrayal.
It's kind of on the same line, same line but different. Someone said that their husband expressed that this all sounds very sensual, and they're concerned about getting turned on and then being subsequently frustrated since intercourse is currently off the table.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, great. I'm glad that was brought up. So again, without knowing more, here are my first two reactions to that. The first one is, yeah, people are going to sometimes get turned on. And we definitely don't want to think that that's a bad thing, but we want to know what are great outlets for that. And so whether it is that partnerships have the discussion of, is solo stimulation okay, whether with the partner lying right there or not, that might sometimes be an option for people. How can I kind of, if I get hungry and you're not, how do I go and make myself a snack, so to speak? And then the other piece is, again, if one person gets turned on, can we take the focus off of what you can't do and put the focus on what you can do? That maybe intercourse is off the table, but does that mean that we can't, and again, it depends on people's comfort, but that we can't use a sleeve if the partner who's frustrated is someone with a penis, and they can't have intercourse because their partner with a vagina can't have penetration, can we get a vaginal sleeve and can we use that lying together and rubbing on the rest of our bodies together and in some way simulate intercourse in a way that doesn't harm the person with lichen sclerosis? What are other ways, hand jobs, oral sex, all sorts of things that we can validate that one person's turned on and would love to have maybe a form of sexual release. But again, let's get off of the idea that the egg has to be in one basket and it needs to be intercourse. Let's make sure that there's validation of the partner who can't have intercourse and validation of the partner who would still love to have sexual release in some form.
I'm going to kind of combine this question. So it's about starting a new relationship. How do you bring the conversation up as the starter? And then if you're in a new relationship, how do you address the disappointment of a potential new partner? So how do you bring it up, and then
do you assume that it, and when we say bring it up, the assumption is, how do you bring lichen sclerosis up? Is that what we're talking with it?
So the inability to have sex, or that sex is kind of off of the table.
Yeah,
great example they said is like, oh, by the way, I have an autoimmune disease that may prevent me from having sex.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to start.
I think it's great. And you know what I say, because I have this conversation a lot with my clients who cannot engage in intercourse or penetration or genital activities, is, especially if it is a female speaking to a male partner, but it's true in either way. In some ways, men are used to that you can't always have sex because some women don't want to do it when they're on their period, or they were teenagers and they don't want to get pregnant, or they wanted to wait until marriage, or a person's not feeling well, pregnancy. Like, it's not like people can't handle, oh, that's not going to happen right now. The key piece is that, do we still show enthusiasm if I still want to be intimate with you? In all my years of doing this, and I've been doing this for a long time, over with thousands of people now, I have never had a partner say to me, if I can't have intercourse, even though it's a great relationship, I'm out of here. But I have had partners say, if I don't feel loved, if I don't feel like there's any focus on connecting and having some sort of sexuality, because it doesn't improve my quality of life, then I might want to leave. And so we want to make sure, again, we're focusing on intimacy in so many other ways. And yes, as you said, just saying, I have this condition. It affects, sometimes it causes a lot of pain. So then I can't have penetration or I can't have genital touch. Other times it's better. I'm working on treatment. But just so you know, I love to do lots of other things. Most people are going to be like, oh, okay, so be it.
Thank you. And the second part was like, what if you do have a partner who's disappointed? Like, how do you deal with a disappointed partner?
Oh, the screen just changed, but that's okay. I'll keep going. Somewhere you're there, Kathy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to again always say that disappointment to me is not the problem. You know, my daughter sometimes asks me, "Can we go to the park today?" And I say no, and she's disappointed. The big piece is, does the disappointment lead to long-term, like hours of feeling hurt, rejected? You know, the disappointment really becomes a problematic piece in the relationship. The fact that someone's disappointed, I don't have a problem with. I just want people to then be able to be like, okay, so what else can we do? Because if my daughter sat there really, and I'm not saying anybody did this, but if my daughter sat there pouting all day and wouldn't be open to anything else I might suggest to her, at some point it's going to lead to a disconnect in my relationship with her, not long term, but just sort of feeling like, hey, I'm suggesting we could play cards. I'm suggesting we could do this. And so we want to make sure that when we have a partner who's disappointed, that we're saying, what else can we do to connect? How wonderful that you want to connect. Let's again connect with other parts of the body, or let's connect with our words, or let's connect by going for a walk. Let's validate the disappointment without the disappointment meaning that the person now is so hurt. Then we have a different issue, which is how do we make sure that partners still feel loved, that partners are not putting all the focus on intercourse as the only way that we can connect, etc.
Thank you. I know we are at time. I don't know if you have any extra time. If not, I completely understand, but we've got about 3 more questions. I'm just gonna, do you have a couple more minutes? If not, that's.
I'm fine. Yeah, you
Okay.
bet, you bet.
All right. So the next question is, do you have any tips on meeting other people who may have conditions that are sex prohibitive? For example, a person in a wheelchair who also has to think outside of the box. So is there like dating apps or anything like that where people like can meet?
Yeah, you know what I'm going to recommend? I'm going to recommend there checking out Andrew Gurza's work, Gurza. If it is, for example, with someone in a wheelchair, Andrew Gurza is a really big advocate for people who have some sort of physical limitations, spinal cord injuries, etc. And he's done a lot of work on sex and disability and has great resources. So I would check out his podcast. I would check out his website. I think he's just a fantastic expert because I won't necessarily know the specifics. So I would go there.
So yeah, you said you wanted people could email you for the list. If someone asked if could you give it to me and then I can pass it on to everyone who attended.
If anyone wants it, and again, don't feel you have to. And some things are not going to be your thing, and some things will be missing. But if people want it, I'm happy to send it to you, Kathy.
And spell Gurza again.
Gurza.
And then
Gurza.
There we go. Got it. I put it in the chat for you. And then a follow-up to where everybody can mute themselves. We're getting a little feedback. A follow-up to a previous question about the concerns about starting intimacy and other activities, and then the person who has the LS getting turned on and not being able to have intercourse, they don't want to have the frustration too.
Yeah, that's fair. And again, I back to one of the things I was saying earlier is oftentimes I will hear people like sclerosis or vulvodynia saying, I feel so bad for my partner. And I'm always like, what about you? Absolutely. So this goes back to, again, if I were working with a person, I would figure out for them what are the ways that they can reach sexual pleasure. And can we, again, find ways, whether that is with the things that I just said, laugh a little bit with the lube, with the toys that maybe are working around the parts where it's really painful, different kinds of toys that are out there, oral sex with the dental dam, if they're worried again about the creams getting on their partner, is there anything there that we can work with? If not, if really it is genital touch cannot happen, I don't want to sugarcoat it and make it seem overly simplified. I recognize this is not something that changes overnight, but in people with spinal cord injuries, for example, they can learn to orgasm from having their earlobes touched. We can orgasm and we can have sexual pleasure from many different ways, and it will take some time to work on that. I don't want to, again, make this seem like this is just some easy solution, but if sexuality is important, then let's see what can we do to help people to have sexual pleasure. Orgasm, again, actually happens in the brain, not in the body. Yes, it can lead to, ejaculation, it can lead to pelvic floor contractions, but it happens in the brain. How can we help people to have sexual release when that part of their body is out of commission?
This has been amazing. I just want to say I have learned so much. It was awesome. I have so many tips to take even into my relationship, and I hope everybody else here does too. And I want to just talk to you guys about the upcoming Holistic Healing Summit, which is going to be from May 13th to the 17th. If you have been to a past Holistic Healing Summit, you know that it's 5 to 6 days. We bring you experts, and they give you all kinds of tools. It's interactive. There's a lot of information to help you to live with LS from a whole body approach. This year, we are.
You literally taking the whole
Guys,
conference.
can you mute yourself? Sorry. This year, oops, this year we are doing our Holistic Healing Summit is all on partners, caregivers, and disclosure. So we're going to have workshops, support groups, interactive sessions dealing with relationships, sexual health, intimacy, communication, all of the things that we've talked about today, even deeper, multiple sessions. And then also, like I said, we're going to be talking about disclosure, those questions about how do you talk to somebody when you're dating? How do you talk to your partner about your LS? Sometimes it's not easy to explain. This is what I'm feeling. It's hard for our partners, even our friends and families, to understand how we really, really feel, because there is no equivalent unless you've gone through something similar. So finding those words, giving you just the tools to have that conversation in a way that is empathetic and takes your partner into account, because LS doesn't just happen to us, it happens to our relationships. And so this 5-day event is in May 13th to the 17th. We have 3 passes. You have your free pass, your basic pass, and your all access pass. Your all access pass gets you all of the goods. This year, we are raising the price to $125, but we also are giving you extra things. But as attendees of today, you get to get your all access pass extra early for $75. So that's $50. That's going to be the lowest price that it is going to be, and it's only going to be for the next 3 days. So I will put the link in the chat. We're also going to send you an email. So if you want to get even more goodness, multiple experts, Dr. Klein, I believe, is going to do a workshop. Still talked about it. So we're gonna do a lot more education, support, and everything around this important topic. So I just wanted to share that with you guys, and I appreciate you staying a little bit over. Thank you so much, Dr. Klein. Like I said,
Sure.
this has been amazing. You're getting so much love in the chat. And someone did ask if they're in your area, is a one-time appointment, is that feasible?
Yeah, great question. So the answer is, yeah, I am only licensed and insured to practice in British Columbia, meaning the client has to be in BC or the Yukon, which is a little irony. If they're not, I cannot see them. If they are, absolutely. I do have a little bit of a wait time, I'm afraid, but if it's truly a one-time consultation, I might be able to get you in on a cancellation. So just send me an email, let me know if you're in BC. And if you're not in BC, and if I know someone in your area, then I'm always happy to recommend if I can.
Absolutely. And someone asked, yes, the Holistic Healing Summit, if you get the all access pass or the basic pass, you do get the recordings for after. With the basic pass, you get them for 30 days. For the all access pass, you get them for life. And they are keyword searchable. So you don't have to watch hours and hours of a video in order to find the information you want. You put your keyword in there and it will give you all of the clips where that keyword was talked about. So, yeah, and they can make their appointment early, right? So it doesn't have to be a
Yeah.
last minute thing. Yeah. So they'll
No, no,
be
especially because of my wait time, it's better if people get in touch sooner rather than later if they're wanting that. Yeah.
awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. When you click off, there is going to be a short survey. It's a lot of multiple choice. You can just help us to let us know, do you like this? Do you want more? So we can do more of this. And so I will talk to you guys later.